Okay, the record started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the SIG API Machinery meeting. Today is June 11th, 2025. And as usual, this meeting is under the code of conduct, which could be summarized to please be nice and respectful to each other. And today we have multiple agenda added, and we'll begin with maybe the first one, Keith, Majay or Sam, if any of you on the call.
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
here. Yeah, we want to give a demo of Pepr, and Pepr is an emission controller in a webhook framework. And Pepr relies on the things that SIG API Machinery are doing as this mechanisms and mission control Kubernetes informers. I'd like to share my screen if that's okay.
Sure. Give me 1 second. I'll
Okay.
make you the host. Yes. Could you try to see if you can start
Sure.
sharing?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, here we go. All right. Loading. All right, so the purpose of this demo is to basically solicit feedback from the experts, which is you all, and to raise awareness from a user perspective on what Pepr is, and also from a maintainer perspective. So we have an aspirational goal of actually donating Pepr to the CNCF. We're looking for other maintainers, but first we're just going to do a quick overview and just going to take about maybe 5 to 7 minutes, and then we're going to jump into a demo. So what is Pepr? Pepr is a free and flexible Kubernetes admission controller. It handles watch events and basically any event that happens in Kubernetes. What separates Pepr from, like, let's say, Operator SDK or Kube Builder? What we think is Pepr's API is extremely expressive and it's basically like English. Um, so it makes it much easier to do these things without actually needing to know Kubernetes client Go. So basically, Pepr is created to basically remove all the YAML, right? You now have an operating system, or sorry, now you have a whole complete programming language to react to Kubernetes events, whether that be through admission control or informer events when these resources actually exist in the cluster. It's a zero config Kubernetes mutating and validating webhook and admission control generator. So basically you just run a build and it's going to create your mutating and validating webhook configurations. The idea is that you're codifying your legacy, your industry knowledge into code, right? So think like I have to kick this tire, you can codify that. It's 100% written in TypeScript. We chose TypeScript for the API. We thought we could make it like the most obvious with chaining calls, and we're going to look at that. And obviously it runs in the cluster, right? It could run out of the cluster, but natively it runs inside of the cluster in the Pepr system namespace, always talking to kube system. So if you want to kind of think about it from a cloud native landscape perspective, it's somewhat like Hiberno, right? Because the admission control is the first class citizen, if you will. We created the admission control part first, and then eventually we created the informer to watch resources that already exist in the cluster. It uses server-side apply, so it's able to use like very minimal network latency or like smaller packages. So you're only sending kind of like the deltas here. It has a mechanism to reconcile events in a given order. So it's not just like a watch. You can watch events and process them as soon as the event comes in, or we can process events in a queue. It, of course, understands CRDs, native Kubernetes resources, or whichever CRD that you create. We can watch that. We can react to it through admission. And yes, of course, like it creates the webhooks and the scaffolding. And we can basically, just like Operator SDK, when you init an API, create a new API, it gives you the Go types or the Go structs. We can do that in TypeScript and generate CRDs. And we can also we can point to a CRD and generate the TypeScript types as well. So both ways. This is a kind of like really high level overview, but basically it shows where Pepr is and it kind of shows some of its API. but you have all your mutating webhooks, then you have all your validating webhooks, then it persists in etcd, assuming it passes all the validates, and then we're just kind of watching it. So we're just kind of reacting to events in the cluster. This is the main point that we want to kind of you all to look at. So it's API, when we say we think it's very simple, we try to make it as simple as possible. So when a Kubernetes resource, let's say a service manager, is created, is updated, is created or updated, or is deleted, and then we have our labels, which is like with a given name and a given namespace and a regex name with a given annotation. We can add an alias to it, and then we have our webhook phase, our mutates and our validates. I want to mutate this. I want to add this label. I want to mutate this. I want to set a certain security context given it doesn't exist. Then we have our validate phase after our mutate phase, and it's kind of chained off. And we can say like, hey, are they running as root? Reject. If not, let's allow it. Then we have our Kubernetes informer phase, our reconciles, and our reconcile is going to take the events from Kubernetes API server and put them into a queue, or we can just watch them and fire our workload immediately. And then we have this special finalize, which is going to basically, during admission, it's going to slap a finalizer on a resource, and then it's going to call the finalize callback, and it's going to execute the callback, execute the payload, and then it's going to remove the finalizer. So let's say like, I had this CR called web app, and it uses keycloak. And when I remove the web app, I need to do a REST API call to keycloak that says like, hey, let's remove this client ID. Let's clean this up. So it's basically callback driven. Pepr also exists with a store and a scheduler, and the store is a Pepr store CR. And we give the users an API to say like store.setItem, and it sets a key in the instance of the Pepr store, or you can get a key from the instance of the Pepr store, or you can set a key and then wait until it's present in etcd. This is basically our store, and it's just for state management. We also created a scheduler based on the fact that we have teams that they had to maintain cron jobs. And we said like, hey, we can actually give you a very cron-like feel, and you can do this as well in Pepr. So the syntax over here is actually very similar to like the cron job API. So, every 23 hours, I want you to fetch a token from AWS and use that, and then get the item from or use that token from the store to create a REST API call to, get something from an S3 bucket. This is kind of what the scheduler looks like. You just got a name. Every 23 hours, let's get a new fresh token from AWS. Let's set it into the store. This is a little example of the API. But when a pod is created or updated, we're going to validate that it has staying defaults on the security context. And if it doesn't, then we will reject it. We're going to deny the request. But if not, we'll approve it. And this is kind of like our API. Like we want to make it very, very simple for the end user. Here's an example of a mutate. So, you can write as a framework, you can write whatever you want. But in this instance, when a pod is created or updated, we're going to get the resources. If the resources are not defined, we're going to assign sane defaults. So it's like kind of like very much English. And then again, right, you can have this thing like in this instance, we're watching a non-native Kubernetes resource, but like a UDS package. And we're going to set up basically network policy around the application. And then we're also going to set up like Istio and the gateways. This is another example kind of with the store where we're going to kind of like purge an SSO client. So we're going to basically get a token from the store itself, and then we're going to do a REST API call to basically delete something from, let's say, Keycloak. So we strive to make the developer experience as easy as possible, right? Like we want to do all the things that KubeBuilder can do, that Operator SDK can do, but we want everything to be as simple as possible. So our build process, like KubeBuilder, like Operator SDK, is going to generate all the Kubernetes manifests that you need. It's going to generate the deployments, the services, the service accounts, the RBAC, validating, mutating webhook configuration. And typically the way that we see our users utilize this is basically they use like Dependabot or Renovate and they just update the Pepr image. So when we release Pepr, we basically push our images to GitHub. And then we have like the library side of it, which we publish to NPM. And so it kind of keeps incrementing like that. So now Pepr really lowers the barrier of entry for anyone who's like maintaining a cluster or maintaining an operator without like oversimplifying it through the API. And so now I want to jump into a demo. So one thing that's very different about Pepr, we think, is the ability to basically inspect the system. And what we're going to do right now, so we're going to run Pepr outside of the cluster. This is a brand new project. It's been generated. And what we've done now is we get this YAML. We can see this automatically is going to be running Pepr outside of the cluster through K3D, right? Just for the demo. Because why? Because we want to put some breakpoints here. So if we look at this, very first thing is we're going to create a namespace. And this namespace has this label remove me. We're going to actually say namespace.remove label. It's kind of like part of our API right here. So we have this namespace Pepr Demo. We create the namespace. And now if we say, we can say we have effectively actually removed the label. We have keep me, but we don't have remove me. Now we can get into kind of like a little bit more magic here, right? This is the interoperability, the ability to actually see what's going in the cluster. Since we're running outside of the cluster, Kube API server is going to send it to our local host address. And so if we create this namespace, Pepr Demo 2, what we should see is we're going to hit this breakpoint. After this is called the Kubernetes Fluent client, but we're going to create a config map in this new namespace, right? Let's move on. All right, now it's okay, get. Yeah. And now we can see we've successfully like kind of created a config map here. And now we were talking about Pepr store, right? So through this interface, we are actually, when we say store.setItem, we said watch data here. And you can see watch data is actually available in the store. So when we say store.setItem, we're actually setting an item like in an instance in etcd, which makes it retrieve it very easily. So we can say store.getItem. Furthermore, let's look at something else. Let's say if we get a secret, we can kind of place items onto the secret like this. So we have this secret with name, secret 1. We're going to go ahead and create the secret. And now if we inspect the secret, we can see we've actually added magic, some base, and this is like plain English, is kind of base 64 encoded. And we can see example has also been appended. So if we look at this, the screen's in my way. Data, example. code. And we can see Unicorn Magic now modified by Pepr. So I wanted to keep this kind of short. I know there's plenty other people that are kind of going to be talking about things today, but really what we really wanted to do was to make you all as experts kind of aware of this project, as we completely rely on you all and the informers and admission control, and to solicit feedback and to kind of just give user awareness. And also, like, if you all like this tool and would like to help maintain with us, we would be thrilled. And we're in Kubernetes Slack under Pepr. And yeah, just kind of keep it short and sweet. Um, at this point, I'd just like to ask if there are any questions at all over anything you all have seen today. Hey,
Yeah.
David. Sorry.
I'm interested in maybe the scope, and it's probably listed in the project,
Mhm,
but the scope where you see it, because I can see for some simple controller use cases, for instance, that it makes sense.
mhm,
Um, Controller runtime doesn't try to be complicated.
mhm,
Neither does do the core cube primitives. A lot of that ends up coming from interdependencies between resources as you
mhm,
try to do things like recube or in finalizers especially. You're often waiting for something and something else has to happen and you're observing it and you're trying to notify on these channels.
mhm.
Do you see this growing to get there, or do you see that as like we want to satisfy the simple use cases only,
Yeah,
or what?
that's a great question. So initially, Pepr was created kind of like for the SRE that may not know Go, that may actually not know coding all that well at all. And so we wanted to have like a very low barrier of entry. But since it's was created about 2 years ago, the scope has shifted, and now like the the major product at Defense Unicorns is an operator that's kind of built in this framework. So basically, long story short, I would say hopefully, like we would love to get there. Yeah,
Okay. I wish you all the best.
thank you.
Um,
Thank you.
so
Yeah.
I,
Any
I
other
have one
questions?
one quick question. Sorry, I couldn't tell if it was like self-registering webhook and admission configurations. I was curious if you found if you've run into like reliability issues there, especially on the unregistration side. Like
Yeah,
self-registering is easy. Self-unregistering has kind of been a nightmare or has the potential to be a nightmare. I'm curious, just like the 10-second experience report on that.
yeah. So we haven't had problems. Basically, those when blocks are what we call bindings, and so we can easily build the webhook config based on that. But during like an upgrade or something like that, if there are any change, we would probably have the user like kind of like delete the manifests that are already there, and then kind of build again and deploy again. That's if you by registering, are you talking about mutating and validating webhook configuration objects?
Yeah, I couldn't
Yeah,
tell if when you say like we want to mutate on this type,
yeah.
like if that is building and self-registering a webhook configuration under the covers, or if that's expected to be paired with a manifest that they also apply and or delete.
I hear you. Yeah, yeah. So sorry, that's kind of that's because I did like npx Pepr dev. But what we would recommend to a user in production is they would build the code like just like you saw, and then they would say npx Pepr build. Once that occurs, all the Kubernetes manifests are generated at that time.
Okay. So the
And then you
manifests
would
are
apply.
applied or deleted normally, not
That's
magically.
like,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. It's not magic like that. That would be crazy, but no.
Well, I mean, it's cool when it works great, and then it's terrible when it doesn't work. All right, that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you for the great demo.
Hey, thank you all so much for your time and allowing me to demo today. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Is there anything you're asking for, or is there any questions like from the audience?
I would just love it if you all like this product. Maybe give us a star on GitHub, and if you are looking to use it, please like join our channel, Pepr and Kubernetes Slack, and like would love to work with you all. And if you all wanted to maintain it or do some feature requests or anything or kick the tires on it, that would be amazing.
Yeah, cool. Sounds great. Thank you. Maybe it's time to move to the next topic. Priyanka, if you are ready.
Yeah, so the topic is exactly as written. We got some review on our KEP PR, KEP 4595 cell for CRD additional printer column. And even like I think few hours before this call, there is some ongoing discussion regarding setting cost limits and also some concerns regarding the latency that is being added by cell. In comparison to JSonPath. So I'll just stop there. We wanted to get some feedback on where we are in the KEP documentation, what more is needed for us to make it complete. Or I want to actually get more feedback from Jordan, you and CC, because there are some concerns related to the latency. So if there is anything we can do to address them to move this to alpha. Yeah.
Sure. For those who have no idea of this CAP, and I'm not sure if I'm sharing. Yeah.
Yes, you are sharing. Yeah.
Thank you. So this basically trying to give user more flexibilities on the print columns for CRD. So so proposed to using cell to decide which information going to show. And the biggest concern, it's been a long discussion, and the biggest concern from the previous discussion is obviously around the performance. So thank you so much for putting effort to come up with the performance analysis. And as people can see, so using cell comparing with the normal old JSonPath approach, it's like a roughly 20 to 50 times slower. And I think Jordan also mentioned that the large list kind of operation is not rare in here. And it's going to be the first time we put cell in the reading path. So yeah. I know. I heard that comment a lot. Yeah.
I do think that separating out the compile step. So I just skimmed the update pretty quickly, but it sounded like the benchmark might currently include the compile step and the evaluation step. And so we should definitely split out the compile step because that's done once and then compare evaluations. So I suspect that will make it not be 20x as expensive, but it seems likely. Well, we can wait for the data, but even if it's like 2 or 3 or 5 or 10x as expensive, that still seems problematic to me. I know Joe has been looking at ways to drive the evaluation cost down, so there might be some opportunities there. But a first step of splitting out the compile and evaluation steps so we can get more accurate numbers would help us understand where we're at.
Yep, sure. David, I saw you have a hand.
I just threw up my hand when I heard Jordan list out some of those multipliers. I also would say no to 10x. I would negotiate at 2x though.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I'm looking at it and saying like if it's 2x and I get all this additional power, maybe it's worthwhile for 2x.
Yeah, but, and it's 2x like nanoseconds. I'd be interested in the Alex. I'm less concerned about CPU time if we're like 2x nanoseconds. I know a lot of what Joe was looking at was optimizing evaluation in terms of Alex, like not needing to convert objects. So if our Alex look good and our runtime is like spitting distance close, I'd be more comfortable with it.
Okay. I just wanted to be sure I was on record as like if you get a number that is small, low, single digit, but is a difference, I think it's still worth coming and discussing.
Yep.
Yeah, just want to mention Cellgo community is also working on some performance improvement strategies. And from the past release, I think they were able to get, I forgot the detailed number, but 2 or 3 times faster for the environment configuration. So hopefully we can get a better number later. Yeah, Sreeram?
Yeah.
You have a hand?
Yeah. So the benchmarks that we've done right now, the times that we've gotten are in microseconds. This is like I wanted to mention this when Jordan mentioned like 2x nanoseconds is a reasonable time here. Oh, again, one more thing I want to point out is that what we had discussed with Joe was that like what if we keep the cell limit, like we'll take a complex JSON path and we'll keep the cell limit so that we are only allowing cell to run as long as a complex JSON path would take. So we are not making it worse than what JSON path is today. But yeah, I still agree that this would take longer when there are like a lot of items in the list. But I just wanted to call that out in the meeting.
Oh, it looks like that you already did split out compilation and evaluation. So evaluation looks like it's 10x-ish. Am I misreading that? Print results, find results. We don't have to spend time in the meeting reading this, but
yeah, it's more than 10 times from my
it's
reading.
better than 20 to 30, definitely. So splitting out compilation is like that helped a lot, but we're still probably not where we need to be. Bounding the cell evaluation and doing sort of unpredictable, non-deterministic things. If the cell evaluation takes too long, like omitting columns or like, I have a really hard time seeing us doing that. That doesn't seem like a good solution. So this gets us closer, maybe looking for opportunities to improve the performance further to get us close enough to be comfortable with it would be the next step.
Yeah, Priyanka, you have a hand?
Yeah, I just have two questions. So first, CC, you mentioned there is some work happening around optimizing and in the cell space itself, not for this feature. Can you point us to some pointers or links to that thing so we can try testing with those optimization and see if we can lower down this number? And the second one is all of this like optimization now necessary for at the KEP documentation stage itself? Should we like before even we merge the documentation, we should consider getting better benchmarks? Just want to understand since this first KEP I'm writing. Yeah.
I think before we proceed to calling it implementable, we want to have a pretty good degree of confidence that we can hit the targets we need to actually merge anything. So some amount of benchmarking, understanding what performance targets are, having a plausible plan to get there, that seems like a prereq. It might be the case that we say, once we get sort of close enough with our proof of concepts, we could say, we're confident we can get there, here's the bar, and then the implementation becomes like, get to that bar before you merge.
Got it. So just from the conversation so far, I'll take it as the best case scenario 2 times, or we come back with anything better than what we have now and reconsider, renegotiate.
I think that's probably ballpark reasonable. Like I'd be comfortable proceeding at least in an alpha with that. I'll let David and CC chime in.
Yeah, I think
David, you have
2x is probably where I'd be willing to talk about it. Like I want to look at more detail. If I think higher than 2x, it'd be a very difficult sell.
Yeah.
I think that regardless of whether this KEP goes implementable and merges, I'd like to see the benchmark, like perhaps even merging it, because if we know that if we know that Go is going to make improvements, then having a benchmark already made that you can just go back to and say, hey, Go got better. Are we good enough now? I think is valuable to be able to do. Does that make sense? Because I don't think any of us are arguing against the fundamental idea. We're saying if it's too costly, we can't do it. And so if it gets cheaper, being able to come back and say, hey, it's now cheaper. We have the benchmark and we can see it. It's useful for us to know.
Yeah. And just to, I think I mentioned this in a comment, but this is the first place we're using cell in a read path across list items. So it's kind of a scary step that we want to be super careful about. Powerful, but scary.
Scale makes difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think from previous discussion, we also make it clear that the benchmark or the performance has to meet certain criteria before we can kind of mark it as implementable.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully we'll get there.
But I agree with David. If there's a way to write a sort of targeted benchmark that encapsulates like the mechanics of what we would be doing without having to merge a bunch of other implementation stuff. Like if the implementation basically lives in the benchmark, so we can very easily tell, oh, we updated our cell version, we updated our Go version. Is it better enough now? That would be great.
Yeah, sreeram?
Yeah, so Joe actually gave a PR approval for this KEP. So what I understand from our conversation now is that even for alpha, we would want to get the like cell like evaluation times to 2x that of JSONPath before we proceed, even for alpha, right?
Yeah, I think so. I can't in a state where it is a 10x cost, I can't see proceeding beyond alpha, and I wouldn't want you to spend a bunch of your time doing that. I think the approval is certainly he had to leave on PTO, and I think the approval is I have reviewed this. The design itself is good, and we're contingent on performance, and this is us trying to help work that out.
Just to add that, like his approval is for PR review. So yeah, it's only an evaluation of the PR questions, and the extra margin is still depending on the performance. Yeah.
Yeah,
Other
thanks.
questions? Priyanka, I saw your hand.
Okay, yeah, just last one. While we are at concerns, I also wanted to add there is one more caveat we wrote down in our documentation that might still be concerning for this feature to go in. So right now with JSONPath, we can access metadata fields under metadata. With cell by design, right now we drop all those fields. So that is also a concern. Basically, if we allow cell base CRD additional printer column will not be able to write equivalent or anything with which is accessing metadata field. So
That's surprising.
there is
Why is
that
that
also.
I think all the places where we dropped metadata access from cell were to prevent validation from breaking standard things about metadata. I don't think there's any fundamental reason to keep a read-only use from accessing metadata. So it might be that you're just like the places we had adapters for custom resources to cell access hadn't needed to give read-only access for like print purposes. But I would expect a printer to be able to read freely from most of metadata, maybe all of metadata. I hadn't thought about things like managed fields, but certainly like labels and annotations, I would expect a printer to be able to read from.
That's useful, and yeah, we can try implementing something for our own use case then. Okay, thank you.
There was some discussion previously around accessing to the metadata earlier. I can send you the reference and also send you the reference for the Cellgo performance. But if you are on the latest code base, you should be able to get it. We merged it earlier this release. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Cool.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you,
You're
everyone.
Any other comments? If no, we can move to the next agenda. Sreeram, if you are here.
Yeah, yeah, I'll keep this short. So this issue is about adding cell formats to CRDs so that we can like we don't need to write like redundant validation. So in the issue there was like four formats mentioned: Semver, quantity, IP, and CIDR. Joe had already opened a PR for Semver, and I had referred his PR for trying to implement the quantity format with cell. So in the Semver PR, Joe had imported the Semver package and used that to like parse the Semver string. But in the case of quantity, that logic is written inside API Machinery resource package, and I had tried importing that inside Cube API. It works, but I went through the comments from Jordan and CC earlier today that this would cause like issues when we are vendoring kube-openapi back into Kubernetes. So I wanted to know if the way forward here is to like copy the logic from the API machinery resource quantity to kube-openapi, so that we can use the parse quantity method in order to like use that in the validation in kube-openapi.
Thanks for the PR first, and thanks for the work. So I think previous Jordan had a great insight on like having format support versus the cell library. So this might be a great example. And unfortunately, yes, I think both me and Jordan left comments there, which we are not allowed to import any staging repos from the OpenAPI, which is going to cause the dependency loop in later. So I think having quantity support or some like native format support makes sense to me. I'm curious others thought, because quantity is kind of a very native personal thing of Kubernetes.
Yeah, I think it's mostly
But
a question where it lives.
I also want to ask, like, yeah, the boundaries of like having the format support versus library support. It's been a long discussion, I know.
Separating those feels fragile. Like if you try to split quantity format validation out into some repo like kube-openapi or kate-utils, but then keep the implementation in API Machinery, that's pretty weird.
But currently, we save all the kind of OpenAPI schema kind of validation in this repo, right?
I don't actually know what we do for things like, I mean, maybe quantity is our weirdest.
Quantity is not, of course, but yeah, for others, yeah.
I mean, we have enter string, but there's nothing complicated about that. It's just a union of, it's either an int or it's a string. So that's easy to copy out.
There was discussion
David, can
about
you think
Cider,
of Cider IP?
which I thought was also useful to pull out. We have helpers for Cider already.
But Cider and IP were already, like, those are like standardized, you know, there's standard RFCs for those. OpenAPI already defined formats for those. So we didn't have to do anything magical. Quantity is our own weird concoction.
But one other format that I know for sure I'd like to get eventually is actually a format for cell. I would love to be able to have someone write a CRD and say this field is a cell expression and end up with sensible validation.
The type unaware cell validation. Because you're not going to get any, like, you're not going to get well-known variables or things. So like any type becomes like a dynamic unknown possible type. So it's syntactic checking, but not type checking.
Certainly as a starting point, I can imagine us defining like a useful subset, right? Like think about all the places we have where like you're seeing cell in a bunch of different API spots.
And they're all different.
It drives me nuts. I don't care for it. And
well, no, like the variables they have in scope are different. The types they have are different. Like some of that is
sometimes they are, and sometimes a different choice was just made to name the same thing differently.
Really?
You're talking about other places where cell is, all this library was used?
Yeah, I think that we named an object differently between admission cell and the CRD validation cell. And yeah, but I I see value in actually defining what that looks like.
Yeah.
So I agree. Resource is the weird one. It's simpler than the one I just named, but where would we have that?
Can we open the PR to kube-openapi? I'm curious what the surface area is that we actually need to validate the format.
Sure. You mean this one in the OpenAPI?
Yeah.
Just 1 second. It's going too slow. Okay. Validation. String format.
Parse quantity, is that the function we need? Probably
Yep,
so.
that is the only one that is being used from the API Machinery package.
Yeah. That fans out a lot.
Yeah. We save most of. At the very beginning, actually, we considered to add a self-validation to OpenAPI repo as well, and then we quickly reverted it.
Wow. Yeah, parse quantity actually exercises pretty much the whole package.
And just want to mention, it might help later in the declarative validation. So just want people like who involved in that effort, like just.
Yeah, I'm
So
willing to.
yeah.
Yeah,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I was just going to say that I'm willing to take the discussion offline. I don't want to like hold up other folks who are waiting to present.
Sure. I think the discussion is around like we don't have a standards to kind of add into either format versus the library, and yeah, so that gonna maybe take some time, and I think the implement detail like goes after that. Yeah, cool. I think we can put this offline maybe, if nobody objects. And we still have 15 minutes, so maybe let's move to the next topic. Aaron, if you're here.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to just kind of put out there that there's folks interested in creating kind of a workgroup API expression used to exist, and I think it was Archive maybe recently. So recently there's been work related to currently in declarative validation, but also just generally extending. I don't know if we can, if you want to show the proposal, it's totally fine. I can just talk through it. But with the idea being, more declarative APIs in Kubernetes is like the current goal, and like also kind of building on some of the previous goals, and also kind of trying to converge native types and CRDs, the experience there. So just hoping to spin up a work group around that, if that's interesting to folks here. I think the call to action would be to reply to the email on dev@Kubernetes that kind of is related to creating this work group, because the interest kind of makes it possible to make the work group. So if you're interested in being a part of that, please reply there. And I'm happy to kind of talk more about this, but yeah, I just wanted to kind of state the goal. To post the proposal there and kind of state some of the goals, and just see if there's interested folks. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, happy to answer any questions or anything too.
Yep, thank you. Thank you for raising this. I think if we have this work group for a long time, and the work there seems interesting, so people, whoever is interested, feel free to reach out. I think Aaron already put the communication details there, or you can directly reach out. Yeah, any question or comments?
I guess I'll just say I think it's a good idea. I am looking forward to pushing declarative validation through and finding a way to make the validation capable for CRDs very, very congruent, so that you only learn one set of tags and you get the validation that you want.
Yeah, thank you for pointing out. And hopefully it will help to kind of reduce the size of the existing thousands of lines of validation code later. Yep. Any other comments? If no, I think that's for today. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for the discussions. And I'll see you guys in the next meeting then. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you. See
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you.
folks.